and record.
Oh,
We have
nice
everybody
coming
on.
in. Hello, everybody. We're going to start in just a minute. Everybody is now launching in here, so give us about 1 minute and we'll get started. Thank you. All right, I've got 10:01. Let's get started. Thank you for joining us today at this presentation. My name is Doug Blizzard. I'm the old man in that picture over there. Beside me is the model Kendra Stewart. So, I mean, apparently glamour shots aren't the same for everybody, right? All right, at any rate, although I look better in that picture, I look on live. So at any rate, how about that? So welcome today. We've got an important topic to go through today. Before I jump into the topic, just a couple of administrative issues. We are recording this, so there'll be a recording with a link sent out after this. In the event you have to hop off, or if in the event you want to send this to somebody else at your company, we're also will send you the PowerPoint deck as well. So you don't need to be copying the PowerPoint deck or doing screenshots or whatnot. We'll send that to you tomorrow or next day. And if you have questions throughout, please just put those questions in the chat down there, and we'll either answer them right then in the chat, or if it needs a discussion, one of us will ask the other one the question, and we'll hop into a Q&A there. So please feel free to do that as we present. All right, so before we jump in, of course, thank you for most of you who are members of Catapult. As you know, we are an employer association, 1,800 member companies, and mostly the Southeast. And we really exist to provide confidence. As you know, the world is changing like crazy around us right now. Feels like everything is changing in business and life, and you need that kind of, we exist to help you confidently get through a lot of these changes, both from an opportunity standpoint and a challenge standpoint. As you know, we answer 20,000 calls a year, SOS calls, I like to call them, from our members around every possible HR subject you can think about, compliance, HR. And then on the other end, in the development end, we do all kinds of learning trainings for professional, for supervisors, leaders, and oh my gosh, just a full suite of HR consulting services, which is one of the things Kendra leads. And so she's very involved in that. So really just many ways trying to help you, give you confidence that you can accomplish whatever it is that you face. And we most recently launched our member hub. I hope you've been out there. We had a speaker at our last conference that one of the keynotes made the point. This stuck with me. You know, they say you retain 10% of something you learn. So my 10% included this comment. She said, you know, the answer to every question, every issue you face, or every opportunity you want to pursue, the answer to that is somewhere in this room. That was a presentation, but it's somewhere amongst the membership. So we created this hub to give you a confidential member-only forum to communicate, to network with, to ask questions of, to share documents of, with all the members out there, because the answers to everything you face is out there somewhere. You gotta step up. You gotta go out and ask for it. So we're excited about that new hub. Other new things coming in the next few months on the website. We're very excited about redoing that. That's been our big project for the year, to redo the website. So more to come there. Excited about that. Okay, enough about that. You know, you read any kind of top CEO challenges out there, and you know, all the lists differ, but there's 2 or 3 things that are on every list out there of challenges that CEOs face in 2024. One of them, of course, is talent. You all know that. If any of you have solved the talent problem, please call us after this, and we're going to feature you in our next newsletter and in our next webinar, because talent is something that many companies are struggling with right now. The other thing you see a lot about is just change, geopolitical change, tremendous change going on around us. And the third thing you see in most of them is some variant of technology, whether it be generative AI or automation or whatnot. And so today's topic really is around, from the HR seat, you know, how should we be thinking through this technology piece? And we're going to come at this from different angles today. It's not just about HRIS. We're going to hit this different angles today to try to give you hopefully a different take on how we should be approaching technology, what we should be driving, what we should be leading in three big areas of technology. So with that, we're going to launch again. Me and Kendra are going to kind of tag team this. So again, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. Kendra, why don't you start?
Sure. So Doug is right, everybody. I mean, I think the most important thing to think about is, you know, we are HR, there's HR practitioners on the phone. There's probably leaders who have the practitioner underneath them. You come with the idea of how do I navigate and what do I think about with respect to technology? But really, if you think about it, this is not really a conversation today about technology. This is going to be a conversation about change. It's going to be about how and what we're seeing, how things are changing. What are we going to do about it? How do you think about it? What are the things that you as an HR person are going to need to maybe consider in order to manage and navigate through this change? And it just happens to be that one of the biggest areas is our technology. And so that's what we're kind of talking about. So considering it from that perspective, let's take a look at this first slide. So let's talk about change. I like to say, like on the first part of it, this is really about what are we noticing right now out in the marketplace? Like, so you as a personal person, when you go out there, think about how much there has been change. Now, I'm dating myself. Doug was just talking about the fact that I look like the model next to him, but really I'm pretty up there too. So like, I'm going to date myself with some of the things that I'm going to talk about, but like, I remember when I was younger, there was no such thing as ATMs. There was no such thing as like, nobody carries cash anymore. I mean, like some people even consider it an inconvenience. I know I do to a certain extent. And banking has changed so much from when I was younger. And I remember there was just lines of cars and all you had was the window or walking in. Now I laugh when I go past the bank because I mean, other than like maybe a notary, what do I walk in to have anybody do is what I think about. I know there's reasons for us to still need to go to the bank sometimes, but literally it's changed and evolved so much that people just don't bank the same way that they used to. I mean, look at the next one, Amazon, need I say more? Literally, this is an example just yesterday. I mean, before the call, Doug and I were just talking about this. I was driving past with my family in the car and I live in Charlotte. I was going down a strip mall. I mean, literally, we're talking folks on the phone 5-6 years ago. This strip mall was full. It had like, you know, Bye Bye Baby. It had like World Market. It had all of these different like well-known stores that we used to know and shop at. And it was so funny. I looked because I hadn't been past it in a while and the whole place was decimated. Every store was closed except for like a few stores. And I remember I was like, God, this place used to be jumping. Like what happened to it as I was driving by? And my husband was like, Amazon. It's Amazon. I mean, it's changed everything. Nobody needs to go to the store anymore. And that's when I was like, wow, gosh, that is so right. I mean, Amazon has changed the face of everything. You've got Uber. I mean, can you imagine 20 years ago, somebody would have thought that all of us were crazy if we had said that we're going to go on vacation and we're going to stay at a stranger's house. And that is Airbnb. It's one of the best used platforms, period, for like vacation homes or like, you know, competing with the whole hotel industry. It's crazy. So, I mean, these are just personally some of the biggest things that we see with respect to like what we do, like how we live, how we listen to things, how we, you know, like interpret things, how we utilize and communicate. All of these different things are just examples of it. But what's the most interesting piece is while we see this happening all around us, and obviously we can all think about funny examples for things like this in our personal lives, right? Think about it from the work perspective. It's no different. I mean, this technology and the way that change has evolved has entered the workplace in a way that has impacted us to a way that it's not going to go back, folks. I mean, we just got out of, and I would almost argue that, you know, some parts of the industries are still facing it, the Great Resignation. I mean, you know, that was like the #1 thing we all talked about only a few years ago. And I mean, there's hiring shortages, which aren't going anywhere across the board. Those of us, obviously, who are direct practitioners see and understand like the problems that we have with compensation, whether it be with salary rate, salaries rising and like competitiveness for finding the right talent, compression issues that we're seeing across the board in different areas, upskilling. I mean, people are getting to the point that you have to upskill, meaning you invest in the people that you have, because you really almost can't afford in certain circumstances these days to really consider that you'll be able to find the right talent anyway. I mean, talent is starting to get so limited that it's just very hard for us to be able to find the right talent, assuming that because we post a job, we're going to get the greatest person. So upskilling has turned into an entire, or reskilling for that matter, has turned into an entirely new process for us that people are starting to recognize it's got to be a new normal for what we're doing. And I mean, there's other things, right? Socially, people who are coming into the workforce are looking for changes. There's big drives for changes from a DEI perspective. There's all this social unrest, which now bleeds into political things feed into work to a certain extent, and people look for that. And it's important to some people. They look for family-friendly environments, things that would still, even though we're moving a little bit away more from remote, we're starting to move to like hybrid and people going back into the office. But that flexibility, as I'm sure folks probably are seeing themselves in the workplace, is still there and it's still important. And we still have such a large group of people that are still, trickling in and out of the workforce all around. So let's look at the next slide. I think this one's interesting too. Oh,
Hey, Kim,
Doug,
before you go there, and so we had a slide we didn't put in there. We did this speech, a version of the speech at our conference, and so all this is happening, but we had a kind of rate where your company is from a technology standpoint. We had like five or six different decades. And what we found is that a lot of our small to mid-sized members were still back in the year 2000, as far as the systems they use, how they approach technology. And so all this change around us happening, which is modern and right now, but yet we go to work, a lot of our systems are from 10, 15, 20 years ago. That's kind of the dissonance there we've got to work on.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, take a look at the slide. This is what confirms exactly what Doug has just mentioned. I mean, essentially the index of change has been driven so high that in the last 4 years, from this perspective of technology, change has increased 183% in 4 years. I mean, it's big. And I mean, truly what this means is it's very hard and next to impossible for some organizations to be able to find the way to be able to keep up with all of the change that's happening in technology, as well as to be able to figure out like, what do I do with what I have? So that's all around what's the point of what we're going to be talking about today. So next slide, how do we relate that? Because really with all of this change that we're seeing and the fact that technology, we struggle with keeping up with it because it is all changing so fast. We, again, in HR, probably see it and maybe even feel it the most, right? Because a lot of the workplace changes with respect to what we've talked about and joked about in the last few slides we just discussed, really, if you think about it, we kind of might see it first. If you're a practitioner or somebody, again, that has HR under your belt, you're probably seeing it first, no matter like what area or function that you might be dealing with under the HR umbrella. So that being said, really, it is up to us as HR leaders, as leaders within our organization, to be the ones that are going to be able to lead the conversation about how we think about navigating our organizations through this technology. What are the things to think about? How do we help coach and provide that intellect, right, in the conversation to help people understand where we should be? And when you think about it from that perspective, Doug and I had like created it saying, let's think about it from 3 different highs, right, to a whole. First one being your HCM, your human capital management system. Where are you? We were just talking about that with Doug, and we'll go into detail about what decade are you in. Everybody has HCMs in different places. Some of us may not even be using one. Some of us might have all the bells and whistles, but figuring out how to utilize it to your highest potential. But then on the flip side, there is, again, technology that's out there that might be beyond what we currently have. But really, forget about the technology for a quick second. The second piece is, what are your processes looking like? What are you doing in your organization? How do you make what you are doing more productive? How are you utilizing productive tools that are out there today in order to be able to help yourself with how to be more efficient through technology? And then the last piece is back to what we talked about, a little bit more about, how do we utilize the technology that is in fact out there today? Because we have a declining workforce. And I mean, we've heard this before, but truly, I'm going to use the cliche. How do we do more with less when it comes to the workplace? So we're going to talk about each of those sections in order to help you understand with how to lead the conversation in all of these areas in order to be able to drive and navigate not only as an HR person, but to be able to help to be more thoughtful and have maybe your executives or leaders be more thoughtful about how to get there in this area. Doug, any thoughts that you wanted to add before we move on?
No, but I mean, all three are important. And so we felt like it was important to really focus on all three of these, because really technology is not just about HRS payroll. We're going to spend a third talking about that. It's also productivity. And it's also just the other things you're doing to augment, the fewer employees to choose from.
Yep. So let's talk about the first slide here. Before we get into talking about utilizing your HCM system, I'm going to do a quick poll. We want to just get a feel for what you guys on the phone, everybody who's in the audience is currently doing. So we're going to throw a poll out, take a few seconds, please answer it. And really the question is, how many HCM platforms are you using? Is it one? Is it two for more than one? Is it 3 platforms, 4? Just take a second and let's see what we're.
And we say HCM, we mean HRS, payroll, learning management, performance management, benefits, all those major areas of HCM. Do you have one platform or a bunch of them? Interesting. I like how this works. It's kind of cool. How about that?
Yeah, it is kind of awesome to see it play out.
It's like a race. They're coming around oh, now they're tied. It's like the Kentucky Derby here.
This is really interesting. I see one platform for everything is starting to gain momentum. Looks like it's slowing down just a little bit. Oh, I see people coming back. We'll give maybe a few more seconds to let everybody kind of weigh in, but it looks like we're coming down to our participants, and this is quite interesting. So it looks like we're in the lead here with 44%, where most people have like one platform for everything, or half of the people. And then most everybody else looks like has 2 platforms for pretty much everything, which is interesting. I would guess I was willing to bet, which obviously I would have lost, that we were going to actually find most people were going to say 3 platforms. Doug, were you thinking that?
Yeah. Do we have that graph in here? The next graph? It's interesting.
Yeah.
We surveyed 400 HR professionals and CFOs last year. And you can see, we asked them, how likely are you considering all-in-one solution? You can see most of them, 2/3 basically said, not very likely. We like the best in breed approach. And so I'm encouraged, very encouraged to see that almost half of you have gone to that down that road, because it does make it easier for employees.
Yeah, it truly does. I mean, I think it's amazing that we've seen that, folks. And I think a lot of it has to do with, again, the change in some of these platforms that are coming out as well. I think are starting to make it a little bit easier, a little bit more nimble, especially maybe for the member organizations that we utilize a lot. On the next slide, a lot of folks, when you think about like what platforms that you're using, a lot of people, are always talking about the best in breed, the best platform there is, the one with the bells and the whistles and everything, because they're tired of disconnected solutions. You know, they want something that's going to be able to give you the payroll, you know, everything with your employee data goes into the HRIS system. You can tap into your applicant tracking system, all the benefits and stuff can be done. You can do your performance reviews on the learning management system and the performance management system. There's an engagement if you want to do engagement surveys and time and attendance. So people, like when they think about it, you know, are wanting to do that. But a lot of folks that we had found, and at least from the results too, were kind of partially unified in that. You know, there wasn't a lot of organizations out there per se that necessarily utilized all of these into one unified platform. And interestingly, I think on the next slide, there was a poll too that we took, and in that poll, we found that there was some trends. And what you're finding is that, you know, there's, you know, a lot of private equity owned places, and they are smaller, and a lot of folks will argue, hey, they're more nimble. It's going to be a lot easier for us to be able to utilize this smaller system. But we're starting to notice that there's a trend, folks, that, believe it or not, like larger platforms, larger players are actually starting to get into the competition with the smaller categories in order to be able to also grab some of that market share. So like, for instance, Workday, for those of you out here there who might know of or be using Insperity, Workday just partnered and purchased Insperity so that they could start to work with, you know, smaller organizations. And so, you know, folks would argue that they think that, you know, by moving to a smaller one that might have a lot of these similar platforms, it's going to be easier. The customer service might be better. You know, I'm getting away from just making this up, like a larger one that's terrible, like an ADP or a Workday or whatever the case may be. But what this is telling us is that just like any industry, as you know, you get these smaller ones and the larger organizations start to swallow up the smaller ones, you could have a larger platform you don't even realize, you know, is owned by one of these larger organizations. So you don't necessarily know. It's what it comes down to. And again, back to AI has changed quite a bit. And that could also be influencing a lot of what we just talked about, where we're seeing that the folks on the phone are starting to be able to utilize one HCM for everything. Whereas only a few years ago, AI wasn't necessarily being utilized to its fullest potential, and they weren't really integrated as much in a lot of these platforms. You're starting to see that they're starting to be in these applications for HRIS systems. So it is making it easier, I think, for us to be able to utilize technology through them. And again, you know, a lot of folks still complain about customer service being the biggest thing that's lacking. So on the next slide, what's interesting is, you know, we talk about poor technical functionality, in that usually, you know, people will say like, it just doesn't do what I need to do. So I need to go and move to this, or I need to go and move to that, just like we talked about. But really, the new technology may not necessarily be the better. A lot of times we find, and this is particular of like for my group, we've got folks on my team that specialize in HRIS implementations, and they know it. I mean, I've got one who literally has done it on the development side. And I mean, they'll tell you quickly, a lot of the customers will come to us saying, you know, they don't like a certain platform. And it's not about the fact that the technology is actually not there. It is, once they get into the weeds, it's about the fact that maybe it's not fully being utilized to the best of the ability, or the technology, you know, they're not getting the help or the customer service on the technology side that they needed to in order to get it to where we wanted it to be. So switching from one to another isn't going to necessarily improve your situation. You know, if you want to change just because you don't like it, we have a lot of people from that same Catapult survey that said they're actually overwhelmed with even changing it because of their fear for the fact that you switch from one vendor to another and you get some of the same, you know, terrible service. And that is, in fact, that could be true. So maximize your current provider first. Make sure that you're taking a look. Get help from us. I mean, again, at Catapult on my team, we've got people that kind of have been in and out of HRIS systems. We can actually take a look and probably even tell you how you might be able to better utilize it. And again, consider utilizing AI or switching, but just make sure you do it after you've taken a look at everything first. So on the next slide, Let's talk a little bit about changing focus. Let's talk a little bit about increasing productivity and the technology. We talked about the fact that, like, you've looked at and you'd look deep into your HCM system, but this means processes, right? So when you think about how you're doing processes, how you have certain procedures within your department or your area, or just within your company, what are you all doing? So, like, I like to utilize this very simple example. Let's take a job description. There was a time when I remember job descriptions were probably easiest made by, you would say, I need to write a new job description, not really sure what I need to do. You go out to Indeed, maybe you look around, you kind of find what you think are some great ones, pull them in. And then, you spend this time kind of building out what you think is the perfect job description. But that could be very inefficient today. I mean, these days for me, when I want a job description and I want to get a feel for what is a more efficient job description, or what is a way to write it in a way that's going to make it more competitive or suitable for the organization that I'm in. I don't know if anybody has ever considered it. I'd love to see a show of hands for anybody that wants to do it, but ChatGPT is where I would go, honestly. I mean, you can literally give it the specifics of what you want. You can tell it, I want a job description for this particular job where it has this type of experience, and you can get down to specifics and it'll push something out for you. And at least it gives you a basis or a baseline to be able to start it, where you're not now needing to spend the 2-3 hours maybe to develop one from scratch, with the time it takes for you to go looking on the internet and everything else. So to me, it's a great example of the fact that, like, little things that we're doing in our organization can be done a different way. And it's not just within the HR department. I use that job description as an example, but there are many other ways in which you can ensure that we're equipping employees to be able to use and save time with some of the more latest technologies. Especially when you're in a more, hybrid virtual environment, it's really more important. So let's look at what some of these technologies are really quickly. So I've got somebody here that actually says, I use ChatGPT too to assist with job descriptions, postings, emails. It's a great time saver. And it is. So for anybody who hasn't utilized it, feel free. But I mean, there's much, much more out there than ChatGPT. I know it gets a lot of traction in the media and in the news because it was one of the first that was kind of out of the chute. But I mean, all across the board in operations, I mean, take a look at some of these productivity tools. There are great task management tools that can help with project management, even task management as it relates to schedules, like Trello, for an example, time management, like Toggle. I'm not sure if anybody has utilized any of these tools before. Feel free to throw it in the chat if there's some, and how you're utilizing it, because I do think it would be helpful for others to be able to hear. But these are great examples of productivity tools that could be utilized in HR, but also could be utilized outside of the world of, HR, and easily be utilized operationally in order to make processes and what we do more efficient. Let's look at some of the others as well. So again, I talked about ChatGPT because it can be so versatile, but I'm curious, has anybody used Microsoft Copilot? I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. It's a wonderful app. You can put it on your phone. It does the same thing GPT does. Literally, though, I mean, you've got it mobily. You put it in that app. Same thing. You can punch in things that you needed to do. So this is again from a virtual world. You can utilize Copilot, and I've got somebody that says, I just put it on. I'm testing it right now. So this is good. If you're not utilizing these things, we welcome you to go ahead and consider trying them, because there's so many different areas. So for instance, video editing, let's say that you're in the training department or even within the media group within your organization, there's video editing that you can do with DanScript. Another one, content creating in Jasper. That DALL-E3, I mean, that one creates images from words. Generating code, if you don't have time, if you need help with being able to do that, you've got apps that can do that. Transcribing meetings, I think sometimes too, for those of us, I know at Catapult, we use, not Zoom, but we use Microsoft Teams. And sometimes we can actually turn on our AI tool that can help to transcribe for us too. So it is there. Oh yeah, somebody else says, yep, I've used Otter AI, helps me keep focused on the meeting instead of writing notes. Absolutely. How many times in the past, again, think about the change. We've had somebody that's had to be a quote note taker, right? In order for us to be able to take notes and hold on to them. That can be no more. You can utilize these tools in order to make it more efficient, send it out. Everybody knows like what their due dates or whatever it is that they need to know without the extra step of us having to rewrite an email that's going to take much longer to be able to do something. So these are all examples of great ways that people have utilized it. And I see a lot of folks are actually utilizing it on the chat as well. Let's
Yeah,
go
I mean,
to.
if you find yourself or your employees laboring away with PowerPoints or, I mean, DALL-E 3 is now built into Microsoft Copilot. Now, the only rub there is when you go the Copilot route, which is included, you only get, I forget what they call it, you only get so many images a day. And you get to a point where it says timeout, I forget what they call it, bank or something, you've used too much. Whereas if you go to DALL-E itself, you get unlimited. And it's really, I mean, I saw a presenter one time that literally goes in and I tried it and it worked. Show me a futuristic picture of the downtown Wilmington waterfront, and it goes out and does it. And it's really interesting. So, I mean, again, it's just an area of, it can do presentations for you. Create me a presentation on change management. I'm not saying it's the end all of end all, but it's from a starting point standpoint, tremendous start to at least get some ideas going and get some slides, particularly on the images side.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that I, for my own work, I mean, sometimes I think just to be able to figure out or gather words, right? Like how you want to put together something in a way that seems more coherent than maybe what you are thinking in your mind. I often use it, honestly, to be able to say, did I leave something out? Just as something to double check. So I'm not wasting time, maybe asking like another coworker or somebody for some help with something that I can maybe just, punch it into one of these different technologies and have it spit something out so that hopefully I can enhance what I already have. So Doug is absolutely right. I mean, these are here. They're there for us to use. I mean, the only thing I would also say, this is a note that my husband's an architect in cybersecurity. The only thing that I usually like to remind people, especially when you're new to it, is just remember, whatever you put into these AI tools, it's going to keep it. So you don't want to put anything in there that might be like proprietary, unless you have your own AI cloud, and then that way it's okay. Whatever goes in there is going to be used for everybody else, so that obviously, everybody else gets to partake, but you don't want to put anything in there, obviously, that you are okay with going out to the world to be able to.
You ask Hunter Biden that. Did you see in this trial, all his texts, all the texts he sent, all the texts you send and all the pictures you send are on servers somewhere. The other thing, in an HR standpoint, we've used it at Catapult. You can literally, you want to do a memo or an announcement to staff. You can literally tell it, write an article to staff about a layoff in a caring, sympathetic tone.
Yes.
And it does it. And we weren't having a layoff. We had an email to send about a change one time, and we've been going back and forth for days on this thing among the leadership team. And I finally said, let me try something. So I went out and typed this thing in ChatGPT and said, hey, everyone, here's what ChatGPT says. And it was like, wow. And you'd be amazed. I mean, we didn't use all of it, but it was definitely, it's pretty slick. Again, you got to put eyes on it, but it's not just for job descriptions and a policy. It could be for anything. And obviously there you can buy into chat at higher levels to get more of that confidentiality and security that you would not get on the free version. But it's definitely something that I think from an HR standpoint, we need to be really driving in our organization. So
yeah. And
excellent.
I think we just had a question where somebody had said, like, how is it in relationship to cybersecurity? And is it okay to put these things, on my drive? And I would say the first answer is always check with your IT folks, right? In order to make sure like what can be more compatible than others. They can probably also give you suggestions of what they think are the better tools for you to utilize on your system first. But with relationship to it, I think the biggest thing is what Doug and I had mentioned. For the proprietary stuff, right? You just want to make sure, for those of you who are out there that might be newer to it, Once you do get it on there, you just want to make sure that whatever you're putting out there, obviously not with company name, not anything that obviously is unique only to your company and things like that, because once it is out there, it would be shared with everybody else. So that's probably the biggest key you want to keep in mind. Any other questions? I know we've gone through a lot of technology and things like that, but we thought it would be nice to be able to let everybody literally see a list of what
Yeah,
could be used.
There's
And I
more on
think
the
we-
next slide. How about on the next
Yeah, I
slide?
think we have one more slide too. Perfect. Yeah. So we talked about the ones at the top, but we wanted to also add just a few more, just so that everybody can kind of still get a feel for all the, I mean, these are ones that we're probably even more familiar with, like the communication platform, like Slack, Zoom, obviously 365. But I mean, you know, a lot of us have these great Microsoft tools that maybe we haven't even used, like OneDrive, OneNote, right? And then also there's health and ergonomic ones like Stretchly, and continuous learning that like a lot of our training partners might know of, like Coursera. These are all out there. Again, they are all very helpful. And the key is that it's about making productivity more efficient. And as you can see, this is across the board. This isn't just an HR thing. But again, I think it is key to know and understand these tools so that you can help to drive them in that conversation in your organization.
You can think about 365 and, oh, that's Word and Excel, right? Oh, no, but it's also our phone system is now run through Office 365. We don't have a phone carrier.
Yep.
We go through Office 365. It's all voice over IP, right? Of course, our meetings we run in there. Also, our, you know, we do our intranet, our Catapult intranet is now built on 365. It's just interesting, kind of there's so much in there beyond just Word and Excel and PowerPoint.
Yep. All right, so the last piece is going back to what we talked about. How are we navigating in a declining workforce? So this slide is always telling. We've been kind of, you know, discussing it and utilizing it for many of our conversations because it's just such an eye opener. I mean, like I have this statistic from another presentation I've done, which relates to this slide. I always find it amazing, and like usually it kind of perks up and makes people like, oh wow. Did you know in 2023, 45% of US employees were searching for a new position or planning to do so. So only last year, 50% of the workforce was constantly considering leaving their role. I mean, that's half of everybody working, folks, pretty much. I mean, and what this pretty much is showing on this is that we're in a decline. We've been in a decline for a while, at least 2010. And literally every year, we have around 10,000 Americans that are turning 65, and essentially folks are leaving the workforce at a higher rate than we are able to put people back into the workforce. There's declining rates of fertility, and that has a lot of influence to it. So what this means is the pool of people that we are seeing in the workforce is only going to continue to get smaller and smaller. I mean, that's what this graph is essentially telling you. So it goes back to what we started off with about the change and the fact that you will find that there's just going to be less people working. It doesn't matter which industry you're in. It doesn't matter, you know, what job that you're talking about. It's just going to be harder all around. And so because of that, we got to start thinking outside of the box with the technology that we have in order to be able to recognize how can we do more with the less people that we have? What are new ways to think about taking that technology and using it in order to be able to offset the fact that like, there's just not going to be the people out there anymore like we've had in the past. That is going to be the new normal. Doug, any thoughts on this one?
No, I think you're right. I mean, we've talked already about your HCM, and obviously the message there was, you know, if you're struggling, you're not likely to get a better situation somewhere else. So how can we fix where we are right now? We talked about productivity, and our message there is HR should be leading that. I mean, it's not IT should be responsible for making it happen, but HR should be leading that. Are we really driving people to productivity again around this? Do more with less. And if this part here is about, there's just a fewer supply, that this graph is the working age population in America. And you can see it's not a good future there. I mean, you can see right now we're about in 1960 level, right now of actual numbers of people working. We've had 50 straight years. I just heard last week that last year was the lowest. 50 straight years of below replacement birth rate. It was the worst last year. It's been decades. Our kids are not having kids at the same rate that we and our parents did. And so that's a big thing. And so now the thing is, how can we HR start talking more about how do we redesign the work, the actual work itself? One way is be more efficient. That was the last section. Yes, we can definitely help our employees be more efficient. That's part of it. But the third thing is, even with the efficiency is not going to be enough. How do we get more work done with less people? And that's what this next section is about. So maybe go to the next slide, I guess. Again, we just said that. I get asked all the time, what am I going to do? I can't afford to keep raising wages. What do? I said, well, you got to figure out to get more work done with less people. So next slide. This is a part of another presentation. I'm not going through all these things here. I've got a whole other presentation on transforming the work. But you can see here, when you think about how to do more with less, several of these things do build around technology. And so I'm going to take a few of these slides going forward and talk about how we can do more with less from the technology standpoint. There's a lot more to talk about here. We can't unpack now, but it's really about how do we now in HR start thinking more about how we actually do the work, how that engineer actually does the work. As opposed to just, I'm trying to find people, I'm trying to hire them, trying to pay them right. Still got to do that. So next slide, please. So we think about streamlining operations. I love this blue box over here, because I really do believe this is a pivotal moment now for HR leaders. This came out of an IBM study last year around HR helping to define how the organization kind of marries AI and people together. I mean, literally every industry now, AI is in there somehow, whether you know it or not, realize it or not. And it's only going to get more pervasive going forward. We're just on the starting point of this. So if you feel like you're pulling your hair out now, oh my gosh, this is too much AI. Oh my gosh, it's getting more and more and more every year. And so I think it's now time to think about how can we start utilizing AI, automation to really replace jobs. And next, if you think about it, I'm gonna remind you of a few things. Go to the next slide. If you think about it, I mean, who's been into McDonald's? I mean, this is the actual in Phoenix, Arizona. There are 2 McDonald's now that literally there's an automated robot that cooks the food and puts it in the bags. All right. This top part here, my friend of mine just had kidney surgery. The surgery was done remotely by a doctor in another country. All right, using this kind of robotic machine. Again, we always say, oh, healthcare is different. It's got to be in person. Well, a lot of it has to be true, but yet even healthcare is now using robotic surgeries, other tools to, again, just more with less. I mean, how many surveys or studies have we seen? Shortage of nurses, shortage of doctors. All right, they're having to adjust to that reality. We're going to have fewer doctors and fewer nurses. We're going to have to figure out a way to get this done. Look at the bottom here. Oh, but construction is different. Construction is always going to be about people. Well, this is actually a bricklaying machine, 3,000 bricks an hour. Again, even construction. So every industry is playing. Go to the next slide, please. I mean, who's been to Lowe's recently? I mean, good luck trying to find someone to check you out in Lowe's. There might be one person. All the rest are self-checkout. Why is that? Is that just because? No, it's because Lowe's can't find people. That's part of it. And 2, it's more efficient for them. Bolinda, even Bojangles, one of my favorite places, Bojangles, they now have Bolinda, meaning a lot of them, you're not talking to a person. Now you are in East North Carolina, but in a lot of other locations, they're now trying this AI drive-through order. You're talking to a robot. Any country music fans? Who's heard the new Randy Travis song? Randy Travis, who had a stroke, I don't know, 10 years ago, can barely speak now, has a new song out using an AI-generated voice. And I'll be honest, I love Randy Travis, and it's pretty close. So it's really every industry that has some version of this. Go to the next slide, please. Legal profession, oh my gosh. I mean, you think about, oh no, legal is they got to be in a room with a bunch of old books and do case study, research and whatnot. I mean, the job of paralegal is changing tremendously. They now have AI tools there that can do all the research, review contracts, draft contracts, predict, even judges are now using AI to take all the facts in a case and show possible outcomes and to recommend sentencing. It's not replacing a judge, but think about this tool here, the hundreds of thousands of cases out there that have happened over the years. And now you got this tool that in a matter of minutes can research them all and produce a report for you that could have never been done by paralegals. Next slide, please. So that's legal. You think about architects, Kendra mentioned that, again, that job is changing. The machines can do the blueprints and can draft the drafts. The job of the architect is more about to understand what their clients need in an environment. Think about HR. So, HR is not just about drafting policy. How do we create the employee experience? How do we create the employee experience? You think about a programmer. We got AI and other tools that can write the code now. The program needs to understand it, obviously, and to be able to second guess and make sure it's correct. But a lot of their jobs is what now working with their internal customers. How do we create value? A financial advisor. Oh my gosh, the AI bots they're doing the investing now. The financial advisor's job is about how do we be there? Like when my wife died 5 years ago, how does that person be there when that kind of thing happens to help you plan through the next part of your life? That's the job now. So what we're seeing is pretty much every industry, there's some version of this happening. And I think it's important now as HR practitioners that we recognize that and that we're the driving force to, hey, the answer isn't always how can we find more people or get more creative on the recruiting side. That's part of it. But the answer is going to have to more and more now become, well, how do we do the job different? How do we redesign the work? How do we, again, like the IBM study said, how do we now fuse together in a responsible way, AI technology with the actual work? And that's a big change. I think that's going to be kind of the next, you're already seeing it in some surveys. That's going to be the next frontier for HR is how do we drive that organizations? Because if we kind of hit our head in the sand and think, oh, people are just lazy and they're sitting at home not wanting to work. Well, there's some of that, but that is not the reason that chart's going down. I mean, it's actually 10,000 turn 65 every day. So, I mean, this is every day for the next like 8 years. Tremendous demographic shifts in our country. So anyway, next slide, please. So we really have to think about as HR, how do we, and I'm not going through all this. If you like these last slides, I've got another presentation on that. But the blue box here is critical. 40% of the workforce, almost half, will need to reskill due to AI and automation over the next now 2 years. So again, that's why we're talking about this third part of the pie here. This is going to be, and for many companies it already is here, a significant shift. And you just can't lay everybody off and go find, you can't lay off half your workforce that can't do AI or doesn't like change and go find that half somewhere else. You're going to have to figure out how do we upskill the current workforce in these technologies and tools, using productivity tools, but also just the work itself. Think about you're a cash register at Lowe's, right? And those that remain, their job is a lot different today than it was 2 years ago. And so every industry has their version of that. The challenge, I guess, for most of you today is, let's make sure that even in our small and mid-sized companies, that we're starting to drive that. I keynoted the manufacturing conference for Business North Carolina last year, and this year's conference, the last keynote was the president of Cross Company, who basically said that automation is the cure for the labor shortage. And so I did one conference, and the CEO after me was talking about how they tried raising wages and more benefits and everything, and they finally got to a point they couldn't find people. They've now automated 3/4 of their operation, and they're in the construction materials world. So I'm just saying this is something I think HR, because you want to make sure it's done responsibly. We want to make sure it's done in a way that is employee-centric and employee-friendly, and not just, we'll just fire everybody and go to machines. That's not the solution. So that's why HR has got to be part of this. Next slide. All right. So Kendra, you want to close this out?
Sure. So, I mean, obviously, we've gone through a lot. We've given great examples. We've talked about great areas for you to start with and reconsider if you haven't had a chance to do it. But really, it's not going away. I mean, we've talked about it. There's many different examples we've discussed about helping understand that like this is going to be here, and there's no industry that's not going to be impacted. So, biggest thing, if you got to adapt, you got to change. That's the only way that you're going to be able to get past all this. And you got to figure out ways when you're back, sitting in front of the executives or whatever you're doing in your organization to help them figure out how is it that you build more productivity with what you're seeing in your organization. All talent's not going to be equal. So how do you do it, again, in a way that's going to be able to help the organization, but from an HR perspective? How do you do it from that lens? And I think that's the most important things for us to be able to remember from today.
And I think that my fear is if we don't start driving, then we're going to have to just live with what the company decides to do. So, I see companies in three buckets. One bucket is head in sand, denying, oh, this is a urban problem. This isn't a problem in East North Carolina. We're fine. We'll keep doing things the way we've always done them. And those companies are getting bought and going out of business. Then I've got the companies that are just trying to be more competitive. We're raising wages and doing. Then I've got this last group that has figured out the world is not going back to where it once was, and how do we transform what we're doing?
Yep.
My fear is that's the reality, and I would hope for you that you can figure how do I be part of driving that? Otherwise, we'll be back in giving out layoff when we used to have a machine go lay off some people, and that's just I'd rather us be in let's do this in a responsible way.
Yep.
Because everyone agrees the machines by themselves are not enough. You got to have the humans. So how do we upskill our current workforce that's already here and already loyal? How do we do that in a way that gets us to the right future without just cutting half the workforce, or being bought out? I mean, good every day in the paper, someone's been bought out.
Yeah.
So I think HR can be a driver of this, and I encourage you to be thinking about these three parts of the pie. Are we optimizing our HCM? Are we optimizing productivity? And then are we optimizing kind of the future of work for us? I think if you can do those three things, good things are going to happen for you.
Yeah. And I don't think we mean, this is not to say this is you driving it alone, right? I mean, this is for you to bring the conversation forward, get help. I mean, like sometimes it could be as small as involve employees, get answers from them on like how you can help to implement these sorts of changes. So it's not about you deciding and you bringing this to the table. It's about how to bring the conversation to the table so that, like Doug says, you're not left out of it. All right, so next slide. Perfect.
Of course, if we can help, we can help. I mean, we're
Yeah.
happy to talk to you and help you think through these things. We have our new hub I mentioned that go out there and see what others in your industry are doing. This is a confidential members only forum. We encourage you to use it for that. And we'd be happy to help you there. Think through all these things. I mean, I get calls every week. I had one yesterday, around HCM, and oh my gosh, it's helping people thinking through what their HCM strategy could be. And maybe you want us to help you think through productivity or help you think through this last one. Hey, how do we start having those conversations with leaders about the new way forward? So that's what we're here for, to as a sounding board, advice. We also do the compliance side, of course. As you know, we get 20,000 calls a year, and a lot of them are compliance, wage and hour, ADA, FMLA. Happy to help you think through those things, or you and or your teams. And then the last slide is, or we can also help you come do things for you. We do a lot of HR consulting and training. So that's us. Anything HR, we've got a solution there and can come along beside you and help make your company shine. So we've got a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes. Any questions for us? Any comments? Anything you want to share? I see a chat down there now. What is that chat about? Oh, it's been really great. Thank you, Carney. Any other comments, questions before we go back to the real world? All right. Well, great. Well, thank you for playing along today. We hope you took away at least one or two good nuggets today. If we can help, please call. You'll be getting an email shortly with the PowerPoint deck and the recording. And hope you have a great week.
Thanks, everybody.
And as we march swiftly towards July 4th here, it's crazy. This year's almost half over. Have a great rest of your day and week. Take care, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.